Welcome to Making Sense with Steve. Today we're going to talk about America and can it be saved? I think the best place to start this conversation is going to be with the building blocks that have led up to the situation that we're in today. The beginning of the fall of America was at the actual very beginning of the country itself. Just as with everything in life, we all begin dying the moment that we're born. In the beginning, prior to even the Constitution, we had the first political parties. The United States in the 21st century is predominantly a two-party system. Although more than two political parties exist, many American voters tend to side with one of the big two, the Democrats or the Republicans. In George Washington's farewell address, he warned his fellow Americans about the dangers of political parties. He said, "The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism." He claimed the partisanship would lead to interpolitical conflict, divide the nation, and give rise to cases of tyranny. Is this not what we are seeing right now in our government and our society? Now, this is from constitutionfacts.com. And then I'll scroll down here a bit. What each early party believed: the Federalists, committed to physically sound and nationalistic government, favored a national band. I believe that's a typo, and it should be national bank. Tariffs and good relations with Britain. Supported implied powers, those powers authorized by a legal document from the Constitution, which, while not stated, seem to be implied by powers expressly stated. More conservative views composed of the elite class. Now, the Jeffersonian Republicans, committed to the rights of the states, are the primacy of yeoman farmers and the principles of republicanism, liberty and inalienable rights. Opposed the Jay Treaty, wanted good relations with France, not Britain. Opposed the ideas of a national bank being the Federal Reserve System, or implied powers, predominantly anti-administration. And then down here underneath it says, the Jeffersonian Republican Party outlasted the Federalist Party, which had been seen by the people as too elitist. Is that not what we see in the Democrat Party right now? Jefferson's party came to be the foundation for both the modern Republican and Democrat parties, although these current forms are vastly different from the early sect. I would disagree with the end of this. I believe the Federalists is what became the Democrat Party. The way the Democrat Party believes or operates nowadays, well, actually, it's both parties. The Constitution tells us who the teams are, and the teams are the government and the people. By creating the different parties, we created a division, and then because of personal beliefs, that created a division in the population. United we stand, divided we fall. But where it got off the rails was with President Lincoln. The one thing that we're never taught, we're never told when it comes to President Lincoln is he was the very first president that forced the will of the federal government over the sovereign rights of the states. Prior to President Lincoln, the states were in control of this country. The federal government had very little power, and that was the original design of the country. As we move forward from there, the next major blow to America was the women's suffrage movement. What this created the first crack in the foundation of the family. Husbands and wives were now voting independently of each other instead of as a collective. As time went on, this turned over control of the country to women because women outnumber men. It's that simple. So as we advance forward from suffrage, because of the power of women and their vote, the first thing that we saw happen was prohibition. The one thing that you'll notice if you watch how people behave, women,
not all, but most,
are about forcing their will upon someone else. And that's what prohibition was. Women forcing their will upon someone else. But the one thing that they don't tell you is out of prohibition came organized crime. That's probably the feminists' best creation that they've come up with, although they're doing a good job now. We're still today fighting organized crime. Now, prohibition was supposed to happen, but not so much as prohibition. The intent was to use the grains from making alcohol to help the troops in World War I, but World War I ended before prohibition went into effect. For some reason, back then, we understood that when we got on a bad path, we needed to get off that path. So prohibition was repealed. As we move forward through time, because of the power of the female vote, we invoked more and more laws that were not equal or fair. They were anti-male, and they have victimized males. Don't get this twisted. Many people think that feminism from the 60s was when the fight against men between men and women started. It's not. You can go back and research suffrage, and suffrage was all about, the women were all about saying they wanted to put their boot on the necks of men. So it was never about working with men. It was about having power and control over them. I'm going to jump forward to feminism of the 60s. Feminism of the 60s ramped up war between men and women. Actually, it was just a war of women against men. Men never really paid any attention to it. But men were being blamed for everything. This created great division in society. As the women were preoccupied with trying to make war with men, the government just marched forward with more and more restrictive laws on the people, which is not the way America was designed. Then came, out of the 60s and feminism, the sexual revolution. Women are free to be as promiscuous as they want. Okay. That hasn't turned out to work that well for women. What I'm trying to get you to understand is it's the moral degradation that's taking place as this marches forward within our society. Again, with the typical female nature of forcing their will upon someone else instead of negotiating and everybody trying to come to terms. They got into the school system. And the way they got into the school system was the federal government, because of what President Lincoln did, became a central distribution center for ideology. And the feminism movement got on board with that and learned how to use that to its advantage. I personally believe the government wanted them to and allowed them to. So they got into our school system, and what they started doing was, little by little, destroying our educational system. In fact, we are to the point now where you come out of high school and you're no better off than when you went in. Straight out of Karl Marx and communism, the way to succeed at your goal is to go after the children, change society with the generations that are coming up. And this is what feminism has done. Feminism takes their cues straight from Karl Marx. All a person has to do is read the feminist handbook and read Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, and they are almost mirror images of each other. I'm not going to go through both of these articles completely that I'm getting ready to present, but this one is from EV Magazine. This is a female-oriented magazine, And as you can see by the title, Why Modern Feminism Wants to Get Rid of the Family. As we scroll down a bit here, we will see that the author of this article says her own Marxist history. Now we're going to jump over to the 5 things Marx wanted to abolish besides private property. This is from Fee Stories. And as we scroll down, we get to number 1, the family. This was my point in the mirror between communism and feminism. There's one more actor in this game. I was unable to find the original website. They've since updated it and taken all this information down. But originally on Black Lives Matter, in their mission statement, 1 was to abolish the family. They did not hide the fact that the people that created Black Lives Matter were lesbians and Marxists, with a desire to overthrow the government of America and make us a Marxist country. So the feminists, every time they got low on money, they took somebody else on board with them, added to their cause. The homosexuals, the blacks, the minorities, you name it. Now they're down to taking fat women. Anything to help increase their money that they've got coming in. You had Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood. Her views were not hidden. The plan of Planned Parenthood was to basically exterminate the black population from America through abortion. Now, when we discuss the moral degradation of a society, how more morally corrupt can it be than to murder a living human being when that human being doesn't even have a chance for escape? When you step on a bug on a sidewalk, that bug at least has a chance to get away. A child in the womb has no chance to get away. And the argument women have, and why we as a society have allowed it is beyond me, is my body, my choice. Well, you're to a degree correct. It is your body and it is your choice, and you made the choice to have unprotected sex. The result of that is a pregnancy. So at that point, it's no longer your body and your choice. You had your body and your choice. Now you deal with what comes from it. We spend billions of dollars traveling space, looking for any sign of life, a single cell. But yet right here in America, it is something to be upheld as a great gift to be able to kill life. No man can take a life without suffering consequences. Yet for some reason, we as a society have allowed women to do it, to the point where they now argue and fight that it's something good. This article about Margaret Sanger continues on. I'm going to clip it off short here to help save time with this overall video. But you are more than welcome to go out, do a search, and learn all about her and her contributions. I won't be discussing Margaret Sanger any further in this video, as the feminists have taken abortion on board as something they believe is good for them to have. So just consider Margaret Sanger and her fight part of feminism. And now the feminists have taken on board the transgender, but this is backfiring on them. Now you have men who are saying that they're women competing in female sports, and the females are not happy about this because they're losing. And women are forcing to have a quota amount of females in certain positions. Well, it's everywhere. They've had to lower the standards for firefighters so that women can be there. They've had to lower the standards for police officers so that women can be there. They've had to lower the standards in the military so that women can be there. Lowering standards only makes us weaker as a nation. This is not a winning formula. Here's an article written by Val Van Brocklin. Obviously, you can tell by the photo it's female, and we're going to be able to tell just exactly where her female bias comes in. Some agencies and academies that use the traditional fitness testing have different standards for men and women, and for different age groups. Examples are in Ohio and Illinois. The military also has different fitness standards based on age and gender. As I understand the argument in support of this, given the different physiology of men and women, a woman can do, for example, 35 push-ups, is as fit as a man who can do 40. Now, as we go down a little further here, we're going to run into, for those expressing concern about entry fitness standards for women, what about maintaining fitness? Where's the concern about the kind of backup or solo subject control an overweight, wheezing, out-of-shape officer can provide? To those who question a petite female officer's ability to wrestle a 250-pound drunk thug, I dare say that would eliminate a lot of men, including 280-pound out-of-shape ones. What you're getting from this is standard feminist dogma about why women should be in positions that ultimately need to be held by men. And we're going to lower everything down so that it makes it easier for women to get there. Now, she played some games with words here. In the first excerpt that I read, a woman who does 35 push-ups is as fit as a man that does 40. But let's take a look at that. A woman who weighs 120 pounds does 35 push-ups, that's a total of 4,200 pounds. A man weighing 200 pounds that does 40 push-ups, that's a total of 8,000 pounds. So being as fit does not equal as capable. In the second portion I highlighted, she makes a comparison between a petite female officer, an overweight male officer, and a 250-pound drunk thug. Well, let's just take a look at a petite female officer versus a 250-pound drunk thug. Well, I'm sorry. What we have here are two female officers attempting to take down an average-sized man on ice skates. As you can see, it doesn't turn out very well for the female officers. The man was resisting arrest, but he was not fighting with the officers, he was just pulling away. This doesn't look as though female officers are near as capable as male officers. I seriously doubt if there had been two male officers there that man would have been able to pull away. Let's take a listen to what Thomas Sowell has to say on the subject of double standards.
Those whites who feel a need to do something with blacks and for blacks have been some of the most dangerous friends of blacks. Academia is the home of many such friends, which is why there are not only double standards of admissions to colleges, but also in some places double standards in grading. The late David Reisman called it affirmative grading. A professor at one of California's state universities, where black students are allowed to graduate on the basis of easier standards, put it bluntly, "We are just lying to these black students when we give them degrees." That lie is particularly deadly when the degree is a medical degree, authorizing someone to treat sick people or perform surgery on children. For years, Dr. Patrick Chavis was held up as a shining example of the success of affirmative action, for he was admitted to medical school as a result of minority preferences and went back to the black community to practice medicine. In fact, he was publicly praised by the Lawyers' Committee for Civil Rights, just 2 weeks before his license was suspended after his patients died under conditions that brought the matter to the attention of the Medical Board of California. An administrative law judge referred to Chavis's inability to perform some of the most basic duties required of a physician. A year later, after a fuller investigation, his license was revoked. Those who had for years been using Chavis as a shining example of the success of affirmative action suddenly changed tactics and claimed that an isolated example of failure proved nothing. Sadly, Chavis was not an isolated example. When a professor at the Harvard Medical School declared publicly, back in the 1970s, that black students were being allowed to graduate from that institution without meeting the same standards as others, he was denounced as a racist for saying that it was cruel to allow trusting patients to pay for our irresponsibility, trusting black patients in many cases. Why do supposedly responsible people create such dangerous double standards? Some imagine that they are being friends to blacks by lowering the standards for them. Some don't think that blacks have what it takes to meet real standards, and that colleges and universities will lose their diversity, and perhaps federal money with it, if they don't lower the standards in order to get an acceptable racial body count. My own experience as a teacher was that black students would meet higher standards if you refused to lower the standards for them. This was not the royal road to popularity, either with the students themselves or with the friends of blacks on the faculty and in the administration. But when the dust finally settled, the students met the standards. We have gotten so used to abysmal performances from black students, beginning and failing ghetto schools, that it is hard for some to believe that black students once did a lot better than they do today, at least in places and times with good schools. As far back as the First World War, black soldiers from New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Ohio scored higher on mental tests than white soldiers from Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Mississippi. During the 1940s, black students in Harlem schools had test scores very similar to those of white working-class students on the Lower East Side of New York. Sometimes the Harlem scores were a little higher or a little lower, but they were never miles behind, the way they are today in many ghetto schools. If blacks could do better back when their opportunities were worse, why can't today's ghetto students do better? Perhaps blacks have too many friends today.
For those who aren't familiar, I would search out Thomas Sowell. Very intelligent man, very knowledgeable. And if you just take what he said there and replace black with women, can you see where this could be going or would be going? And as he said, that doctor was not an isolated incident. We have here, from the Wentworth report, diversity fail. All-woman engineering team blamed for collapse of Miami pedestrian bridge. The all-woman engineering team that designed the ill-fated pedestrian footbridge at Miami's International University were highly touted for their advances in a field that is typically dominated by men. But critics are pointing the finger of blame at the female engineers for design flaws that may have brought the bridge down. Investigators are still on the scene of last week's bridge collapse that killed 6 people and injured 9 on the FIU campus in southwest Miami. Munilla Construction Management, the South Miami-based firm that designed the FIU footbridge, has been sued multiple times for unsafe practices in the past. In early March, MCM was sued by a construction worker who was severely injured when MCM's makeshift bridge at Miami's International Airport collapsed. MCM was awarded the $14.2 million minority contract to design and build the cable-stayed bridge. The company is well connected in Miami politics, and it promotes inclusion and diversity in the workforce. Maybe. When I worked as a programming consultant in Canberra, I had several jobs to rescue and fix a failed project. In each case, the previous consultant was female. Also, let it be known, the author of this article is female, and if I'm not mistaken, this bridge in question here stood for 2 weeks. We have a few more major players in the game. The first one would be corporate America. This one I don't quite understand. Normally what happens when a country goes socialist is before long the government seizes all the private industry. These companies that are following down this path are setting themselves up to have their companies taken away from them. Now, all the companies on the screen are some of the worst when it comes to this whole woke idea that's going on. I decided just to show a couple of them, and I don't want this video to go on for days. One of which is United Airlines. It says, kudos, United Airlines sets new diversity goal for pilots. Well done, United Airlines, for this initiative. United will train 50% women and minority pilots. This is a fantastic initiative. Bottom line. The problem with this is, as we've seen from both Thomas Sowell and from the engineering company that built that bridge in Florida, this picking people by identity does not give us stronger. It gives us weaker. This is going to prove to be a huge failure for both United and America. The next one on the list is the NBA and their Black Lives Matter plastered all over their courts. This is already proven to backfire on the NBA. Their ratings are in the toilet, and I'm not quite sure how they're surviving. The next heavy hitter we have in the game is the media. The media I understand. When a country goes socialist, the media is controlled by the government. So I understand these people believe we're going to become socialists, or they believe we already are. And so they're just getting their foot in the door to be in the right place at the right time. If this wasn't true, then somebody needs to explain to me why CNN is going after Larry Elder instead of merely reporting that Larry Elder was running for governor of California. They would also have to explain this short clip from MSNBC explaining peaceful protests.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started, and there's a crowd that is.
I will briefly step into logos. Now, this is intentional. It started out with the Feminism logo, and as I said earlier, whenever they ran out of money, they took on somebody else. So the LGBTQ alphabet people, then Black Lives Matter, and it's to tie, the logo is to tie the familiarity back to the feminist movement. And as we reach the end of this, we find that the socialist logo is the exact copy of what the feminists used and then transferred over into Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ. This is a concerted effort to destroy America. If we are going to save America, we need to start by cutting off the head of the snake. If we cut the head of the snake off, the body will die. And the head of the snake is the federal government. There's some pieces here that need to be fit together. The feminists use the federal government, or the federal government used the feminists, however you want to look at it. It was a central distribution center. That's how they got all this down into the schools. That's how they've got it everywhere in our society. You can't escape it. In order to cut the head off the snake, I believe there's a few things that we need to do. The first thing, in my opinion, eliminate the 16th Amendment. Now, the 16th Amendment was passed on February 3rd in 1913. We'll remember that year. In November of 1910, began a meeting on Jekyll Island, just off the coast of Georgia. Leading the ultra-secret trip to Georgia was Senator Nelson Aldrich, head of the National Monetary Commission. Joining the senator was A.P. Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Frank Vanderlip, President of National City Bank of New York, Henry P. Davidson, Senior Partner of J.P. Morgan Company, and generally regarded as Morgan's personal emissary, Charles D. Norton, President of the Morgan-dominated First National Bank of New York, Benjamin Strong, also known as the Lieutenant of J.P. Morgan, and Paul Warburg, a recent immigrant from Germany who had joined the banking house of Kuhn, Loeb and Company of New York as a partner. What came out of the meeting with these men was the Federal Reserve System. Now, this was marketed to the people as protecting the people from unfair banking practices. Interestingly enough, had some of the most influential men in banking in the world at the time drafting it up. What it actually became, an unlimited line of credit for America. And this, I believe, is why the 16th Amendment was passed, the federal income tax. This provided collateral in what would be called an accounts receivable, and they use that to borrow against. My question is where is our gold? And was our gold given to these men for creating the Federal Reserve System? Or, as we see here, in 1933, the United States filed bankruptcy. Was that gold used to pay part of that debt? That normally in a bankruptcy situation, you have to surrender assets. I'm just curious. You can do a search and read up on this. But I find it interesting that just 20 years after the Federal Reserve was put in place, the United States went bankrupt. Elimination of the Federal Reserve would be the next step to take. Now, these two steps, these first two, they're not going to take the head off the snake, but it will definitely defang it. It takes the federal government's power away from being able just to print money anytime it wants it. The power will be back into the hands of the states, and the federal government will need the permission of the states to spend money. We're here at the National Archives. We're looking at the next one on the list to go, which would be the 17th Amendment. It's the direct election of U.S. senators. Prior to the 17th Amendment, U.S. senators were elected by the legislation of each state. The purpose was to represent the government of the state, where the House of Representatives represented people. What we have here is on April 8th, 1913, 3/4 of the states had ratified the proposed amendment, and it was officially included as the 17th Amendment. Are we noticing a pattern here? Federal income tax, U.S. senators changed to be popular vote, which gave us 2 houses of representatives just with different names. This needs to be reversed. I'm back at the National Archives. The next one on the chopping block is the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment guarantees American women the right to vote. This was a huge mistake. 1, women outnumber men in America. This turned over complete control of the country to women. And we have seen in the past 100 years how destructive this has been to our nation. As I discussed earlier, out of this came what we know as second and third and fourth wave feminism. This was first wave. And from there we have no-fault divorce. Our school systems are falling apart, everything. So what this says is when Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify the amendment on August 18th, 1920, the amendment was adopted. My goodness, we're falling right in line with the other dates. All this stuff happened between 1910 and 1920. Shortly thereafter, we had the Great Depression and then America filing bankruptcy. A few other items that we need to get rid of. We need to get rid of federal welfare and put it back in the hands of the states. We need to get rid of the national school board system, and we need to put that in the hands of the states. Advisors to school boards for curriculum should be business owners, not teachers. Business owners know what they need for employees. We need to remove women from all the positions of power that we've allowed them to get into. The mayor of Seattle, female, in her summer of love, if I remember correctly, 23 people were killed in her autonomous zone. Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, refused to allow a drug into the state of Michigan that proved to be beneficial to people with COVID simply because President Trump said it was beneficial to people with COVID. We have, I believe her name's Kim Gardner out in St. Louis, has charges pending against her for bringing up false allegations against the governor, the former governor of Missouri, and then she turns around and wants to put the McCloskeys on trial for defending their own property. The mayor of Atlanta, who she fortunately is not going to run again, an 8-year-old girl whose parents took the wrong turn, ended up shot and killed because she didn't want to put the police out there to put down a riot. We have female police chiefs all over the country wanting more female officers. We've seen the result of that. And also not wanting to put their officers in harm's way. Wasn't that their job? But we've allowed these women to get into every aspect of society. It has not proven beneficial, regardless of what they try and tell us. I believe if we made those moves to begin with, we could possibly get our country back on track. Once we had these things in place, we could go through and start looking at other forms of reform. As an example, rolling back no-fault divorce. That's it for me. Y'all have a great day, and I'm out.